Sup, you beautiful bastards! Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show, your daily dive into the news, except for Fridays and Saturdays, because I dedicate those days to going outside, touching grass, choosing a random viewer's mother to make a seafood dinner, and seeing where the night takes us after treating her the way that she deserves to be treated, honestly. But luckily for you, today is Sunday, and we got a lot of news to jump through, which actually, it starts with a number of stories that we wanted to get to this week, but we couldn't for time. Starting with, Ohio Republicans are trying to undermine democracy, and you need to buckle up for this one because there are a lot of layers. It's a very big thing. On August 8th, Ohio is holding a special election for people to vote on a measure that will make it harder to pass constitutional amendments by ballot initiative. Specifically, the measure would require petitioners trying to get an initiative on the ballot to get signatures from voters in all of Ohio's 88 counties, which is a massive, massive jump from the current law, which only requires that petitioners collect signatures from 44 counties. Right? Basically, creating a situation where if 87 counties support putting a constitutional amendment to the people, but just one doesn't, it doesn't happen. A single county could effectively hold the rest of the state hostage. The measure would also get rid of the 10-day period during which petitioners are allowed to go out and collect additional signatures if it's determined that they didn't have enough valid signatures to get on the ballot. Easily the most significant step this measure would take is that it would raise the threshold for the number of voters needed to approve a constitutional amendment from 50% to 60%. Right? Meaning, if 59% say, yes, we think this should be done, but 41% say no, the minority of voters could undermine the democratic will of the majority. Right? So we're talking about minority rule. And so unsurprisingly, the move's been highly controversial and widely criticized as undemocratic, with over 250 unions and community groups opposing it, hundreds of demonstrators going to the state legislature to protest against it. I mean, this is so contentious that it even faced bipartisan opposition from Ohio state legislators when they were first considering a resolution to put the question to voters. Right? And the whole idea of increasing the threshold for voter approval on constitutional amendments was brought forward back in November by Ohio's Republican Secretary of State Frank LaRose and Republican Representative Brian Stewart, with the two men and other supporters of the move arguing that this is absolutely necessary to protect Ohio's constitution from out-of-state money and outside special interests. But in a letter to Republicans that was obtained by reporters back in December, Stewart made it abundantly clear that his real intention here was to make it harder for voters to change the Constitution so that the GOP could defeat abortion and gerrymandering amendments. And that whole we're trying to protect the Constitution from out-of-state special interest stuff, it was proved to be total bullshit. This because it was revealed that an Illinois billionaire who funded groups involved in the January 6th insurrection and efforts to overturn the 2020 election had donated $1.1 million to a PAC supporting the effort to raise the vote threshold. Or even before that was discovered, an initial attempt to pass the resolution in December failed to get enough support to pass the legislature because Republicans remained divided on the matter. However, everything changed after two reproductive rights groups teamed up to get an abortion access amendment on the ballot in Ohio this November, with the groups quickly beginning to power through the various hurdles needed to get on the ballot. In fact, as of recording, they're still in the process of collecting signatures, and the fact that this was even a possibility lit a fire under the Republicans' asses. Right, all of a sudden, boom, real life, this is a major existential threat to the GOP efforts to control women's bodies. Right, because recent votes on similar amendments have shown that when the people are actually given a chance to say what they want, they choose reproductive rights. And since Roe was reversed, voters in multiple states have approved constitutional amendments enshrining abortion access. And that includes traditionally conservative and Republican-leaning states like Kansas and Kentucky. But as NPR notes, no vote has exceeded 60%. An AP VoteCast polling last year found that 59% of Ohio voters say abortion should generally be legal. So changing the threshold for a constitutional amendments to be passed to 60% could make all the difference. And so when the Republicans who were initially divided on that 60% threshold measure realized, oh shit, the people could get what they want, they said, not today, democracy, and they banded together early in May to pass a resolution to put the matter to voters. But very notably here, instead of putting that matter on the ballot in November, which is when voters will consider other ballot measures this year, including the probable abortion amendment, the lawmakers set up a special election in August, making it super fucking transparent. This is just an attempt to try and manipulate the issue to go their way by changing the vote threshold before voters considered the abortion protections, which is also why they set the election in the middle of fucking summer when voter turnout could be lower. But that's not even the craziest thing, because this is where shit really goes off the rails. Just 5 months earlier, Ohio's Republican governor signed an election bill that had been passed by the GOP-controlled legislature and literally banned August elections. We're talking about a change that was explicitly supported by many Republicans who argued August elections are expensive and had low turnout. With this, of course, including the same two guys who brought the 60% threshold resolution about in the first place. With Representative Stewart, who introduced the bill, once saying, "I've wanted to eliminate August elections for my entire time as a public official." And as if that wasn't enough, just wait until you hear what Secretary of State LaRose once argued. Right after the Ohio House passed legislation banning August special elections in 2021, this man issued a statement saying, "August special elections generate chronically low turnout because voters aren't expecting an election to occur. This is bad news for the civic health of our state. Interest groups often manipulatively put issues on the ballot in August because they know fewer Ohioans are paying attention. As a result, the side that wins is typically the one that has a vested interest in the passage of the issue. Voters are just as capable of voting on these important issues during the standard primary and general elections. You hypocritical scumbags. It would be funny if it was not scary. If literally your game plan wasn't, we gotta suppress the will of the people because the will of the people's not what we want. They want this so bad because in order for lawmakers to even pass the measure to hold the August special, they literally had to approve a whole separate resolution to bring back August elections for special purposes. Right, so unsurprisingly, the move was very quickly challenged in a lawsuit claiming that the August special election is illegal because it clearly violates the very new ban on August elections. But that suit, which was filed before the Ohio Supreme Court, will have to be dealt with very soon if it's actually going to impact the upcoming election. And in the meantime, I guess the point of this story is if you live in Ohio or someone you know lives in Ohio and you're fans of democracy not being under minority rule, save the date. August 8th. If more people do not spread the word, they are going to successfully fuck you. Because unfortunately, for a growing number of people in this country, it's not about decency, it's not about democracy, it's about power and control. And then Trump's defense in the Mar-a-Lago documents case came crashing down around him last week. Because according to reports, federal prosecutors have a recording of Trump talking about how he kept a classified Pentagon document after he left the White House. With people familiar with the matter speaking to multiple outlets about the recording, which they said was taken during a meeting in July of 2021 at Trump's club in New Jersey. The source is saying that Trump could be heard in the audio complaining about Joint Chiefs of Staff General Mark Milley, who was widely reported had prevented Trump from striking Iran in the last few days of his presidency. Trump then allegedly went on to reference a document he had with him that he said had been compiled by Milley in relation to attacking Iran. And at one point, Trump can even be heard handling paper, but it's unclear if it was the document in question. But the big kicker here is that Trump reportedly said that he should have declassified the document while he was still in office. And that is absolutely huge because it would completely undermine Trump's argument that he declassified all the documents he took when he left the White House. And beyond that, as the New York Times explained, the recording could also assist them in making a case that Mr. Trump was aware that his abilities to possess and to show off classified materials were limited. But we'll also have to wait to see how things play out because this is kind of a constant for Trump. He makes claims, he says something, it's then found out, oh, that's not true, and then he just claims another thing that may or may not be true. And the arguments constantly change regardless of the previous lie. But again, I'm not going to hold my breath expecting Donald Trump to be held accountable. But that's in the I need to see it before I believe it category. And then, for most of us, learning a second language in school wasn't exactly a high point in our academic careers. Right? I've talked about it before. After 3 years of Spanish, I still didn't feel as confident as I'd like to. But thanks to the fantastic sponsor of today's show, Babbel, there's an addictively fun and easy way to learn a new language. All of their lessons are thoughtfully created by over 100 language experts, which means that you can choose from 14 different languages like Spanish, French, Italian, German, and more. And with Babbel, it teaches you bite-sized language lessons that you'll actually use in the real world. Something that absolutely boosted my confidence when I visited Mexico recently. Right? It was great not only to understand the locals, but also ask questions about where we should go, how to get there, where to eat, little things like that. And their 15-minute lessons are built around real life, teaching real-life conversations, not just simple words and phrases. And I absolutely love their speech recognition technology. It helps you to improve your pronunciation and accent so you can make sure you're doing it right. And get this, right now, when you purchase a 3-month Babbel subscription, you'll get an additional 3 months for free. That's 6 months for the price of 3. So just go to Babbel.com and use promo code Phil. That's BABBEL.com, code Phil. Again, that's BABBEL.com, promo code Phil. And then this week you had people trapped under the rubble of a collapsed apartment building in Davenport, Iowa. And this wasn't because of like a tornado or a fire or some other disaster. This was reportedly the work of a cheapskate landlord who didn't want to fork over money to repair his crumbling building. With the building partially collapsing on Sunday afternoon, with as of Thursday 2 tenants, Ryan Hitchcock and Brandon Colvin, believed to still be trapped underneath the rubble, with protesters gathering near the building as the city considers demolition before the 2 men are found. However, you had officials saying the ruins of the building are too dangerous to search, saying that the remainder of the building could collapse at any time. And as far as the owner of the building, Andrew Wold, he was reportedly warned by Ryan Schaffer, a local contractor, that the building was not safe. With Schaffer saying Wold had approached him, asking about the price to repair the building, but walked away because the quote was too high. With Schaffer claiming he wanted to cut the cost by cutting out the shoring and supporting of the building. I said, if we don't do it this way exactly, I'm not putting my guys in there. Somebody's going to die. With Wold then reportedly finding someone to do the work cheaper, and Schaffer driving by just 2 days before the collapse and telling workers, get away, you're going to die. And as far as Wold, and keep in mind this is a just for now, he's currently facing a $300 fine for failing to maintain the property and has been named as a defendant in a civil enforcement action. And as far as what we've heard from him, he gave a thoughts and prayers statement regarding the situation. But again, this is a developing situation. I very much believe that we're going to be talking about it in the very near future, not only to see what happens, but also if anything changes regarding accountability. And then Danny Masterson was found guilty of rape this week. And you probably know Masterson from That 70s Show or for his ties to the Church of Scientology, which made this case all that much bigger. And if you found yourself thinking, wait, didn't this already happen? Yes, there was a sexual misconduct trial that happened last year, but that one ended in a mistrial. So with this new trial that started earlier this year, a jury found him guilty on 2 counts of forcible rape from cases that stem from the early 2000s, with him only getting deadlocked on a 3rd count. But the biggest thing is, from those 2 guilty counts, he now faces up to 30 years behind bars. And with all this, as the Associated Press noted, his role in the Church of Scientology was a very big part of this trial, as the judge allowed expert testimony on church policy from a former official in Scientology leadership who has become a prominent opponent, with many seeing this verdict not just as a condemnation of Masterson, but of Scientology as well, which is also a very key thing to remember here, as there's a separate civil case from the same women accusing him and the church of harassment and stalking. And with that, one of the victims gave a statement saying, "I am experiencing a complex array of emotions, relief, exhaustion, strength, sadness, knowing that my abuser, Danny Masterson, will face accountability for his criminal behavior," and adding, "I am disappointed that he was not convicted on all counts, but take great solace in the fact that he, the Church of Scientology, and others will have to fully account for their abhorrent actions in civil court." And in addition to that, the woman whose accusations landed in a deadlocked count, she also said she was disappointed but hopeful regarding the civil case, saying they will shine a light on how Scientology and other conspirators enabled and sought to cover up Masterson's monstrous behavior. We also heard from notable people in this space like Leah Remini. She, of course, famously left the Church of Scientology and made a lot of content around it. She said senior Scientology officials, civilian Scientologists, and their proxies have conspired to silence victims and intimidate witnesses for decades, and saying this case is just the beginning of our plan to hold them accountable. And so obviously we're going to have to keep our eyes on this story, see what the sentence ends up actually being. But beyond that, we're looking at a situation that could have massive, massive implications for the Church of Scientology moving forward. Though this week, Danny Masterson's case was not the only one with very big updates. We also got the news that Armie Hammer will not be facing charges over a sexual assault allegation against him, with a representative from the LA District Attorney's Office saying there wasn't enough evidence, and explaining sexual assault cases are often difficult to prove, which is why we assign our most experienced prosecutors to review them. In this case, those prosecutors conducted an extremely thorough review, but determined that at this time there is insufficient evidence to charge Mr. Hammer with a crime. And adding, as prosecutors, we have an ethical responsibility to only charge cases that we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And with this, also acknowledging that it can be very hard for victims to come forward with sexual assault allegations, and so victim support services are still available, even if the prosecution does not move forward. But again, emphasizing, and it was kind of standout how much they focused on this, that forcible sexual encounters are hard to prove. Now, as far as Hammer, who had previously denied the allegations, he celebrated the news on Instagram, writing, "I am very grateful to the district attorney for conducting a thorough investigation and coming to the conclusion that I have stood by this entire time, that no crime was committed. I look forward to beginning what will be a long, difficult process of putting my life back together now that my name is clear." But also with this, you have the woman who came forward with the allegations giving a statement obtained by NBC News saying she was disappointed and adding, "I felt a duty to speak out and file a report in order to try to hold Armie accountable for all the harm and trauma he has caused me, and in order to protect other women from experiencing similar abuse." And then Australia's military got a little tarnished this week after one of its most decorated soldiers lost a defamation case against 3 newspapers, because those papers claim that Ben Roberts-Smith murdered 6 Afghans while on deployment. And I don't mean like he killed 6 Afghans while fighting there. I mean murder. Like reportedly in one instance, he kicked a handcuffed man off a cliff and then ordered that he be shot. And a federal judge largely found that the papers could prove these accusations and dismiss the defamation case. And with this, the managing editor of one of the papers said about this win, "It is a vindication for the brave soldiers of the SAS who served their country with distinction and then had the courage to speak the truth about what happened." The win has also been touted as a major win for Australian papers, which have long tried to hold Australia's military accountable for any potential crimes. Although you have people saying this is not a complete win because the military still has many legal protections that let them keep many things secret. So much so that the judge's actual written decision was delayed to let authorities look over it and censor anything that might contain national security information. But as far as Roberts-Smith, he is yet to face any criminal charges. And even with the papers being seen as proving their accusations in this defamation case, that might not be enough. And that's because it was a civil case, and the bar for proving accusations in those cases is far, far lower than in criminal ones. But either way, you have many experts saying this is a big, big stain for Australia's military and a possible career killer for Roberts-Smith, a man who was once universally hailed as a hero and made a career of making media appearances and working in the industry. And then, if you have an eating disorder in the United States, you now have one less resource to turn to. And that's because the National Eating Disorders Association recently ended its phone line and online platform for people seeking help, instead replacing the service with an AI chatbot, which was designed by eating disorder experts called Tessa. And this move understandably shocked many of the paid staffers and volunteers who had been assisting people struggling with things like anorexia and bulimia for over 20 years. And many fearing that a chatbot won't be able to provide the same kind of emotional support that a real person can. Or even worse, it might miss red flags like someone saying they plan to starve themselves and it could accidentally reinforce harmful behavior. And as it turns out, Tessa's developers published studies demonstrating that very risk, though they also showed that it can help improve users' body image. And those supporting this change saying, hey, we think this could be a net positive, saying not only will this be cheaper, but also it can help meet growing demand. Right? I mean, just last year, nearly 70,000 individuals used the helpline, and this move is in line with similar trends among other mental health organizations. But the timing here is also a little suspect. Critics pointing out that the association did this just days after its staff announced that they were forming a union. And while it's unclear exactly what drove that decision, the nonprofit claims that the unionization had nothing to do with it. But regardless of that, Tessa has now been taken down, and the association says that it is being updated and that the latest version will be available soon, which also means that for the time being, there's a ton of people who relied on these services that are now just kind of left out in the cold. And then, how much you pay depends on how much you make, right? That's kind of the general thing around things like taxes. But it also may be the new philosophy that California is looking to apply to electric bills, right? And that's because there was a law that was passed last summer as part part of a larger energy bill. And that'll require California's 3 largest utilities to charge customers based on how much they make in addition to how much electricity they use. Now, that said, the actual numbers have yet to be determined, with the California Public Utilities Commission having until next July to sort out exactly what the rates would be. And as one might expect, there's been a lot of heated debate around this. Supporters arguing that it'll help lower income people adopt cleaner energy by lowering costs. The critics argue that it's unfair to those who maybe make more money and they're trying to conserve energy and may discourage alternatives like solar panels. Personally, just on the surface level, and obviously I'm biased, I'm doing well for myself, but it kind of sounds insane on the surface level. I'll wait to see the actual numbers before full judgment. Or like if I make more money, thus I have a bigger house, thus my utilities are higher, yeah, that makes sense. I'm paying more because I'm using more. But if someone's doing well for themselves monetarily, but at the same time they're not doing things that increase their carbon footprint or things like that, and they're trying to conserve and they're trying to do solar panels, it feels really fucking weird to charge them more. But hey, again, we're gonna have to wait to see more specifics. And after that happens, who knows? Because yes, California is the first state to consider this as an option. But as we often see, sometimes something first happens in California and then we see the spread. And that's actually where your Sunday Philip DeFranco show is gonna end. Thanks as always for being a part of my 100% daily dives into the news when you don't consider Friday and Saturday. My name's Philip DeFranco. You've just been filled in. I love yo faces and I'll see you tomorrow.